Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Relax Running Podcast. Tyson Popplestone here, and today you're in for an absolute treat. I am joined by Alexandra Ellis, coming at us from Los Angeles, and she's a strength and mobility coach. It's a really fun conversation. This chick's really cool. It was a really cool, really informative chat about not only the ways that us as runners can add value to our running performance, but touches on recovery techniques and dealing with common injuries like rolled ankles and ITB pain and knee pain. And she addresses some of the frustrations that she has in the industry when we see a physio or we see a doctor, and we're given broad labels of what's going on without any clarification on what any of that means. So she breaks that down for us. She works with us to help us understand some of the practical tools that we can apply to our weekly training schedule in just simple little steps to not only feel better, feel pain-free, but also take our running to hopefully a brand new level. So it was a really fun conversation. I've linked her website and a couple of things that we spoke about in the description below. So if you're interested, make sure you check that out. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy this fun conversation with myself and Alexandra Ellis. Well, first of all, before I hit record, I was just telling you how grateful I am, because I was convinced that Alex was going to run away on me and never do a podcast again. Because what was it? I think I contacted you for the first time it was probably a month ago. And then there was a podcast organized for the next week. And sadly, my good mate lost his dad, who had been sick for a while. And I thought, oh, she'll understand this. And then 2 weeks later, my little baby boy came into the world 2 weeks early. And I thought, well, okay, now it just sounds like I'm just making up a far more exciting and dramatic life than what I actually live. So I'm so glad that you had the grace to come on the show. And I know people are really going to appreciate it, because, well, I think people are going to notice a little bit of a trend, and it's probably a trend that followed my curiosity the last couple of years. I'm fascinated by, obviously, the world of health and well-being, more specifically running. That's what the foundation of this podcast is about. But the work that you do in mobility and strength and just helping people get a body that doesn't hurt, essentially, is really interesting to me. But without me trying to do any introduction, I thought maybe a nice way to kickstart the conversation would be to handball it to you and let you give people a little bit of an overview of who you are and what specifically you do.
Yeah, definitely. And also, like, life happens. I get it. I've also been that person who I'm perpetually late, always. So I'm like very graceful. I'm like, I get it. Like, life happens. No worries. So glad to be here too. Where to begin? Well, I'm a huge body nerd, and I know you're a running nerd. My interest really is in exactly what you said, of helping people move better and feel better, because I think there's this like generally accepted idea that as we get older, there's some amount of pain we just have to put up with. And I think that's nonsense. And so I'm here and that's my mission. That is the hill I'm willing to die upon, is that life without pain is possible. And I know for runners, especially, like, running is not just an activity that you do. It's so much more than that. It's, mental health and clearing your mind, and it becomes a part of your everyday. So when you have an issue or you have an injury, your choices are to keep running, to ignore it, or when you eventually do find yourself in the office of a physio or a doctor or something like that, they're going to tell you, well, stop running. But how do you stop doing something that is a part of your DNA? And that's where I find body maintenance and mobility really kind of fit in, to help you maintain your body so that you can keep doing the things you want to do on your own terms. And it's honestly no different than how we maintain our dental health. When someone says, well, you got to brush your teeth and you got to floss, twice a day. Okay, no problems, no argument there. And then I say the same thing. Well, maybe 10 minutes a day, you should roll on some balls and maybe do some exercises. No, I don't have time. I couldn't possibly. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be super complicated, but enjoying life without pain, feeling good, no matter what your age is absolutely possible. And so that's what I help people do.
It's so interesting. And I'm 35, and I noticed this 6 or 7 years ago, which to me, even at that time, was really funny. I'd been running with a few people, and one of the guys, I remember he was 28 at the time, and he said it with all sincerity. He goes, I'm getting too old for this. I was like, mate, you're 28 years old. Like, you're a young
Sit
guy.
down, child.
Yeah. And no one in the group really flinched. It was, I don't know if people were being polite or whether it's something that people buy into, but I've definitely noticed it. And even more so now, like I notice a lot of my friends will make that call. Like if there's any pain whatsoever. I was dealing with a little bit of a calf strain a while ago, and tongue in cheek, but with an element of seriousness to it. One of my mates goes, he's like, Tosh, you're just getting old man calves. And I was like, well, no, I don't think that's necessarily what it is. What do you think it is about people aging and just throwing out numbers and using it as a bit of an excuse as to, I don't even know if it's meant to be an excuse. I think people just fall back on the idea, I'm getting older, pain's going to come, deal with it.
Yeah. Well, I think we honestly don't know a lot about our bodies. And even when you, again, go to healthcare professional, they have these like almost like cutesy names to like help you better understand something like a runner's knee. Like, okay, but like, what does that actually mean? You know, it's an issue with the patella and having some inflammation there. And actually calling it like patellofemoral disorder would actually say what it is, but we get almost like kind of brushed off by the medical industry into actually teaching you what's going on with your bodies. Now, as a woman, when I go take my car to get serviced, like I have like my hackles all up because I'm like, they're going to tell me there's like a unicorn in my like gas pipe or something. I don't know. But we go see the doctor, right? And we just like take what they say at face value because we don't know like what's going on. So I think that's a part of it is like there's this fear of any sensation that comes up in your body. And then you go to Google and like two search items down, it's like you probably need surgery and like a whole new joint and like something super catastrophic. So I think understanding more about the sensations that come up and that like pain also doesn't have to be permanent is a huge piece of it. Also, as another 34-year-old, right? I 100% agree with you. There's like a time where you're like, man, I used to get away with so much, right? Like I could do, some crazy stupid workout and be like really sore the next day. And I'm like, no problem. And like, I didn't have to worry about it at all. There are changes that happen to the collagen and how fast things turn over in our bodies as we age. So, like, I mean, it's like with alcohol too. I don't drink like I did when I was 18 because my body just doesn't process it the same way. And like movement is similar, there are again body maintenance things that you can do to address even your calf tension that'll help you to feel better so that you can keep running, keep working out, keep doing whatever you want to do without worrying about things like breaking down.
Yeah, it's a message I need to keep hearing because though I know this and though I have this conversation with you in the moment, I'm like, yeah, I'm getting old man calves. That is what it is. And it is funny. I like your point about just labeling what's actually going on because you're right. I wouldn't have been able to tell you what runner's knee was or tennis elbow was, but just being able to put a name to the actual condition is really helpful. And for me, it was interesting because I started just doing a little bit of a Google, as you said, and I found that for me, there was maybe a little bit of tension in the calf. And I gradually over time just started introducing a little bit of self-massage in and doing a little bit of skipping and some resistance work there. And for the last 6 months, I've had no issue and I've only increased the amount that I'm running. So I was like, okay, well, obviously old man calves wasn't a legitimate excuse. It was just, it was more almost an uneducated overview of what I assumed was going on. But it's, you're in good company here because I can guarantee that people out there would be feeling exact or would be able to relate to what you're saying and definitely what I've saying about my old man calves. The running world is heavily focused on making sure that you're out there and you're doing your running, and I think the strength and mobility side of things is it's really improving the last couple of years, maybe just my awareness of it, but it seems to be more of a regular part of so many people's training. But the one element I get super frustrated with the strength and conditioning world is I get overwhelmed by how much information there is out there. And what I like about your stuff, and I've listened to a few of your interviews and had a good look over your website, I feel like you've got a really nice ability to break down complicated ideas and put it in a way that's structured well and easily implemented so that a runner can start developing these elements of their life? Like, are you able to walk us through that a little bit? Is that a focus of yours to really break down these big overcomplicated terms in order to be able to teach someone how to put it into practice in a more simple way?
Yeah, I mean, being a body nerd for sure, like anatomy is fascinating to me. I like my interest in like biology too started in high school. And so my degree is in exercise biology. I did anatomy in university, and then even after university, went on to do another cadaver lab for funsies. Like it was just, I wanted to. So like I'm so passionate about the body and anatomy and being able to break that down to help, again, just like to help people better understand things is just always been a magical gift that I have. Because again, I feel like if you understand a little bit more about the structure of, what's going on, whether it's your feet, your plantar fascia, the calves, Achilles, like all of that, then you can have a more informed conversation with your coach, with your healthcare provider, with your chiropractor, like whomever, because you have a better understanding of what's going on. And then you also have more confidence to troubleshoot a little bit, just like you did, right? Like, let me work on some self massage, let me work on some strengthening, which actually I find like the key to mobility work and staying out of pain is honestly working on strength and not just like the big moves of squats and deadlifts, but also the smaller, more boring moves like calf raises and hip circles and things like that. But yeah, if you understand what's happening, then I feel like you're like, okay, well, let me just try this and see what happens. It's not such a big, scary, confusing thing when you kind of understand what's happening.
Yeah. So mobility to me is almost like an umbrella term. Like, I understand roughly what it means, like your ability to use your body well or use your body effectively. But when we say mobility, are we referring to, is that flexibility, that's strength, that's things like yoga? Does all of that fit under this word mobility?
Yes, great question. So I used to teach yoga, and my background, once I graduated from university, I did, was teaching yoga and went through like 500 hours of training, all of that. But I also am hypermobile and have like inherent joint flexibility that will never go anywhere.
You're
So
the kind of
doing something.
person I hate being next to someone like you in a yoga class, because I'm like, okay, I know I'm not supposed to compare, but she can touch her toes without any issue. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just had to let you know
No,
how.
no. But it's not always helpful because when
Yeah.
I was like the most flexible and I had zero stability in my body, like I remember taking a class and we were doing like back bends, and for sure I can do the movement. And then I'm laid out in bed for 3 days after because my whole body is like, what just happened? So I knew, and also too, like I feel like this happens in the running world all the time as well. Oh, your calves are sore or they're tight. Well, just stretch them. Right. But like that doesn't always work for people. And for a lot of people, because oftentimes you need to build strength. So I was like, okay, I like yoga and I like flexibility for people who need flexibility. But honestly, more of what we need is control of the joints at any range of motion. So to me, mobility is both that strength and flexibility. And I feel like a lot of it, just this video I saw on TikTok too, they're like crawling around on the floor. I'm like, that looks awesome. But how does that help me when I can't even bend over because my back hurts? So I feel like for most people, mobility is learning how to hold yourself in better positions, having the endurance and strength to stay there, and to be able to stabilize yourself through whatever movements you want to do. And a lot of what I do with people is addressing the tension that might be preventing that with self massage, therapy balls, things like that. And then the strengthening piece of it isn't so much like a bodybuilder, Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of business, but more of just reminding your brain and body how to work together to reestablish that movement pattern and that movement habit instead of whatever slouchy compensation injury stuff that has been there before.
Sorry, you cut out a little bit in that last little
Oh
bit.
no.
I missed the last little half of that sentence. It was so good as well.
Oh no.
No, I gotcha. I gotcha. So what were you saying? So that last little part of the sentence, do you remember you were talking about the slouchy nature of so many
Oh, yeah,
people?
yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, and the mobility for me is bringing in the self massage and the therapy ball work to address any
Yeah.
tension that might be preventing you from getting into your best posture, your best positions,
Yeah.
instead of the injury compensation or the, slouchy positions or just like whatever it's been that has been potentially, contributing to the issue.
It makes so much sense. I feel like this has been a hot topic the last couple of years as well. I've noticed is just the way that our modern lifestyles impact not just our running, but our ability just to move around in a healthy way. And my mum works as a personal assistant in a hospital, and she's pretty comfortable. She'll go in there, and she's pretty much on her bum for 8 hours a day, and it's just a normal part of her life. She's not
Mhm.
necessarily interested in health and wellness like I am. It's just a part of what she does for her work. But is there a big correlation from your perspective in people who work a fairly sedentary style life and the issues that come up? Because you often hear people talk about how constantly looking down at your phone is causing upper back problems and neck problems and things. Do you see a lot of that? Like, how much of an issue is that really?
I feel like it does matter, of course. But a lot of the people I work with are already active and moving around, but like pain is kind of in the way. Because I feel like if you are mostly sedentary, sort of like your mom as well, it's like if there's not something she like wants to do that she's like being limited to do, there's not really that like push to do anything about it.
Mhm.
But for those of us who are super active, when you have a pain or injury, just kind of cleaning up your movement and bringing movement in and like more movement variety into your day.
Yeah.
So that's something simple like right now I'm standing at my desk and talking to you so that when I go melt into my couch later, like I don't worry about it because like I've done other movements. Or when I get on my phone, sometimes I'll like drop down into a squat to do it because then I can hold my phone up at eye level and just, bringing more movement variety into your body in a way that your normal day to day doesn't give you. Because even though I'm standing, like I'm on a computer all day, like how do you
Yeah.
run a business, in the modern age and not be on a computer? So my mobility practice is addressing, tension at the front of my shoulders from being on a computer all day and making sure that I'm working on my upper back and strengthening that to bring me back to my baseline of better posture.
Yeah. How do you structure your week around strength and mobility? Because I know it's a very individualized thing. And as you said, different people come to you with different issues. But as someone who's heavily involved in the field, I'm just curious to know how like your days revolves or how you choose your exercise based on days, or like, is there muscle groups that you work at a certain time, or do you alternate strength with flexibility? It's a fascinating topic. It's just one that I'm really curious about.
Yeah. So I like to do weight training 2 to sometimes 3 days a week. And mostly what I do is like a full body type of program. So I am following some programming now. Deadlifts, squats, overhead presses, just like the basic stuff. Because also I'm not training for a race. I'm not training for a competition. Like I'm just training for life. So making sure that I'm moving in, good form couple times a week and picking up heavy stuff. I'm also waiting for some new dumbbells, so it'll be even heavier stuff. I'm very excited about that. And then mobility wise, I like to do it actually paired with like my evening television with my husband. So like
Yeah.
we'll watch a program. If I'm not melting into the couch, I'd say 9 times out of 10, I'm on the floor rolling my feet out or rolling my hips out or doing something because you can still watch TV and work on the self massage exercises, whatever you need. Now, I also acknowledge like it's easier for me because it's all like up here in my head. I don't have to watch a video. That's also why I encourage people like it doesn't have to be something new every single time you do it. You can pick some body area again for you, like with the calves. I know it's not an issue anymore, but like let's say that still was bothering you. So figure out, I want to do this mobilization and roll here and then do this type of strengthening stuff, and then stick with that for like 4 weeks, because then you're able to accumulate enough time to decide, like, is this helping, is it not helping? And also, it's not as much like energetic brain work to come up with something new every single time.
Yeah.
So I'll stick with, I have like my baseline of things I need to do on a regular basis. Like I mentioned, like upper back, just like being on a computer and dealing with that. And then other specialty items, I'll bring in the evenings, like 3 times a week, when I'm sitting in front of the television doing that type of stuff. And that honestly is enough. So, like, keeping it super simple so that you, again, can accumulate time doing that thing. But then also, it's not like another piece of programming or like another workout that you have to do. It's just a simple kind of maintenance thing.
Yeah, I've got a similar routine. I think I often also just fold up in the couch at the end of a day, and I've been
Mhm.
trying to be a little more disciplined with, because we've got a. I'm looking at it here. I'm using it as like a sound protector at the moment. It's like a big baby mat. It's a
Mhm.
big baby mat
Yeah.
that our little man can get on and just have a crawl around on. And whenever I'm down there, I do a similar kind of thing. It's almost like play. It's fairly unstructured kind of. Usually for me, it's just stretching. I've got a foam roller. I don't use it enough. I'm going to pick your brain about that in a minute, but I like the idea of, as you say, it doesn't have to be structured necessarily. It's just another form of movement. And I think
Mhm.
often it can be. It's like when I was new to the gym about 7 years ago. I started going to the gym after I finished competitive running, and I remember walking in, it's being overwhelmed by all the different exercises. And at that time, I had absolutely no idea about how people train. I didn't know, like, some people did their biceps and triceps. Other people like, no, you got to do your back and your chest. And I was like, I don't know.
Mhm.
Like, you guys all seem like you know a lot more than me, and I definitely don't trust any of the opinions that I'm having right now. So over time, obviously, with like a lot of questions, a lot of reading and things like that, I feel as though I've got like an element of a fair bit of confidence in the workout routine that I have now. But what I love is, because so much of my day is structured, I love that free time kind of thing. It's just an ability
Mhm.
just to be able to switch off while you're doing something else you enjoy. So I'm glad that that's a something that you recommend. Even someone with your level of professionalism in this industry is still just having a bit of fun. But
Yeah.
the foam roller is another one, and I like that you said this on your website, because I think it was on your website. I could just be making that up. You're speaking about a lot of people just have no idea about how to even start with a foam roller. I kind of
Mhm.
don't. Like, I've got a rough idea. I've had a foam roller for years. I've rolled on it a lot. I couldn't tell you if I'm doing it right. I couldn't even tell you how many times a week I should be doing it. Or what? Can you give us a little bit of an overview of some of the benefits? Like, obviously, we know
Yes.
it's going to address some muscle tension. It's going to hopefully hit down into some of the little tension points. But is there anything else going on? And how do we for lack of a better word, structure a little bit of roll time?
Yeah. So, first of all, like, I have a foam roller too, and it sits in the closet and it collects a lot of dust. Because you've probably rolled your IT band before and it felt
Oh,
like murder, and you
oh,
were
I
like,
want to.
I'm never gonna do that again.
I feel like
That's
I feel like crying just hearing you say that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, everyone knows, right? It feels awful. So I actually prefer to use therapy balls that are about the size of like a tennis ball, but are much softer than like a lacrosse ball, for example. Because like I know lacrosse balls are super popular, they're easy to get your hands on, they're very, very hard. So if we're thinking of, like body tools, a foam roller is kind of like a paint roller. It's big, it's broad, but it's also imprecise. Whereas a therapy ball that's smaller is able to get into nooks and crannies and create, stretch not only in the muscle tissue itself, but like between tissues and within the fascias and that connective tissue as well. So it also doesn't hurt nearly as much, a softer tool. So that alone, it being more pleasurable and enjoyable, will allow you to do it more often. So how to like bring it in? I would say just start with what hurts and roll that out. And of course, with therapy balls, there's more techniques that you can do, for the calf as well. You could put the therapy balls, just like put your calf on top of it and roll it that way. Or you could do one ball on either side of the calf if you're sitting, and make like a kebab almost. So it also gives you some more variety again in how you're actually using the tool, and it just doesn't hurt nearly as much as foam rollers or lacrosse balls.
Yeah,
So
they're
I would
brutal.
say, I know, and this just, it's awful. I mean, not to say that like using therapy balls on your IT band doesn't also feel like gross. Um, but what we're really trying to do is have a conversation with the nervous system, right? And to have your nervous system also relax into this self massage that you're doing. So if it is so intense and so painful that your whole body is in tension, or you are just like and can't even take a full breath, it's not making any change happen. Like if you were laying on a massage table and like clenching your teeth and holding your breath the whole time, how would you feel when you walked off? Like not great, But we do the same thing with our self massage. And then we're like, well, I don't like it. I don't want to do it. And that's why I think foam rollers are so dusty and alone in so many corners. So I would say start with a better tool that's going to be more kind to your tissues and more enjoyable in how it feels. And then roll what hurts. For runners, for sure, the bottoms of your feet are a great place to start. Calves, quads, hips, the IT band, nobody likes, but it does feel really good. Upper back, like you could roll everything, but again, like pick one body area, like I mentioned, stick with that for at least a couple weeks and just see what changes you're able to make.
Beautiful. Yeah. So were you saying with the tension that you store so often when it's super painful, you'll leave
Mhm.
that massage table or you'll leave that roll and it doesn't feel as though it's done anything? Is that just because the muscle's so tense you haven't been able to access any of the deeper levels of it? Or what's going on there? Because I noticed that as well. Like I used to have a like a massage therapist that I'd see, and he had a reputation for just being he was just horrible in the sense of, I mean, he was a lovely person, but
So hard.
his hands were so strong. So every time Wednesday came around, I knew I would finish my run and the real workout was about to begin. And I don't like to cry in front of grown men in the wrong situations. And that was one where he had me on the brink of it so many times. And it was always brutal for a couple of days. But I often noticed if I could, and it seemed ironic, but he would often say, just relax into it as much as you can, because if you
Mhm.
can learn to relax with this tension, the pressure, it's going to be more helpful to your muscles. And it always felt horrific for a couple of hours after. The next morning, I was always very sore. But then I think
Mhm.
1 or 2 days later, it started to feel as though it was maybe paying dividends a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and also with therapy ball stuff or anything you can do for yourself more regularly, that just means like that surface level daily kind of buildup of tension, so to speak, is addressed so that when you do go see a massage therapist, they can actually work on the deeper stuff because you've dealt with all of your just regular day to day kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, do it regularly and your massages will be so much more delightful.
Yeah.
But tension also, it's like, why are we tight in the first place, right? Why does this tissue feel restricted? Why does it feel like maybe even hard, like whatever? It's going to be overuse of the area, underuse, misuse, or like a compensation kind of thing, or injury. And it's tightening up because your body's trying to like protect it, right? So oftentimes that tension is a direct result of like some other movement pattern going on. And I know, and I'm not even 100% sure like where this idea came from, but like we like to think, well, harder is better, right? If I go at it with a harder tool or I go at it for longer or I just like really dig in there, that's obviously better, right? But like you also mentioned, it's super sore after because you're fighting with your body's own protective stretch receptors that are trying to prevent overstretch from happening. And yeah, I can kind of breathe into it, but I think that pain and that sensation and learning how to work with it instead of fighting against it is also really valuable. So we can't blast through our fascia. We can't like your collagen is so stinking strong. My anatomy mentor is a man named Gil Headley. He, if you think I'm nerdy about anatomy, he is like super nerdy about anatomy. And so I did a cadaver lab with him and he did this whole other one and like we're sharing videos from it, but I just distinctly remember they cut a sheet of fascia. So fascia is a connective tissue. It's like a body wide web all throughout our body. We're familiar with famous fascias like your IT band, that's deep fascia, the plantar fascia fascia is another kind of fascia, but it is wrapping around and mixing through like every tissue in your body, muscles, nerves, ligaments, all of that. So they cut a sheet of superficial fascia, the fascia that's just below the layer of your skin. And I think it was like the abdomen. So we think, oh, it's just like adipose. It's just like fat, like whatever. But then I think it was like 60 pounds or something of weights that like clipped to it. This is like super weird, super nerdy. But they were able to pick it up with this sheet of fascia. And you could see the fascia stretch, but like it doesn't tear. I know, don't worry. It's a cadaver. It's okay. But your fascia is super strong, right? That's why you are able to pick up your kids. You're able to pick up, you know, a 50-pound bag of dog food or whatever, and like your arms don't fall off. So the idea that like I can take a foam roller and roll hard enough to actually break anything apart, it doesn't work that way. What's really happening is this conversation with the nervous system to be able to relax into the stretch and adapt to the stretch. And that doesn't happen from one super intense session, but from multiple sessions over time. And that's where that consistency piece really comes in.
Yeah.
Then to really seal the deal, this is where those strength building activations that I talked about. So again, for the calves, I'm going to roll out my feet probably and my calves, maybe even my shins to address whatever tension and compensation patterns are happening. And then to activate and help my brain and body get reconnected in a more efficient movement pattern. Maybe I do an exercise like a heel tap where I balance on one foot and then tap the opposite heel to the ground. Super simple, but then your body goes, oh, this is what it is to move without pain. And this is how plantar fascia and the calf muscles and the shins and the hips and everything is supposed to work together. Oh, I don't have to keep doing that same pattern that's leading to the tension in the first place.
That's so interesting. One of the things that I do at least once a week, and I actually follow a bloke. I don't know if you've heard of Travis Elliott. He's a YouTube yoga teacher. I think he's based in LA. He's got a pretty big following, but he's got some awesome yin yoga classes. And often, as I'm going through some of those classes, he'll talk in the background about just stretching into that fascia. And that's the best description that I've heard of. I hadn't looked too far into what it was and all the deep impacts that it has on the other parts of your body. But if there's one thing in my own training week that makes me feel incredibly relaxed, incredibly loose, I feel like a better person after an hour of yin yoga. Is that just some of the follow-on effects from like a more extended stretch into what's clearly a pretty powerful feature of the body?
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, especially with yin yoga too, it's the whole bringing your nervous system back to kind of a more relaxed baseline, because we could be within that fight or flight, that sympathetic response, which I think honestly with like technology, like I have a bright light shining in my face right now, like all of those things are stressful for your nervous system. And then we're like, oh, and I should just be able to like lay down and close my eyes and like it all goes away. And it's not how it works. And imagine also like with kids and less sleep, you know, these are all things that kind of keep us in that sympathetic drive. But it's a continuum. So if I can rest, like a yin yoga class where I'm focusing on breathing and those long held stretches, which also help to bring your entire nervous system into more of the rest and digest or the parasympathetic nervous system, that's all great. What I love about self massage is that's literally a switch, a physiological switch you can make for your tissues, because there are special receptors and nerve endings within your fascia that respond to that touch, that take you from that sympathetic into the parasympathetic in a matter of minutes. So it's a similar response to what you're talking about after that whole yoga class, but I can make that shift happen in like 4 minutes instead.
That's a dream.
Yeah.
That's
Telling
a
you,
dream.
just get like a ball, roll on a ball, especially like on your abdomen. I have an air filled ball that I use for like deep belly breathing and practicing that. And it's intense to begin with, I will say. But as you get used to it, like that for like 4 minutes, I'm just like, okay, cool. I'm ready for bed now.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it's funny you say that. I often feel like I sleep a lot better after I've done something like that. Like in my experience, it's been the yin yoga when I've done that relatively close to bedtime, which has been nice. I'm just curious, obviously, as I said, there's so many different people that you work with, but obviously the audience here are distance runners predominantly. if a distance runner lined up a class with you and just said, "Hey, look, I'm just trying to figure out ways to improve my running performance," where do you even take that conversation? Like, what have you got a series of questions that you ask just to launch that conversation? Because obviously, the world of running, it's such a there's so many different bodies that take part in that I guess it's difficult as a generalized kind of a statement. But if you got a couple of go-to questions that you get the patient to pay attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I did dabble in running. Like I've done a half marathon. I think it was like a 14K because there was chocolate involved, and a 10K and a 5K. Like I really, really tried. And this was all before I started mobility work and like knew anything. So I had a lot of pain with all of those.
What
So
half marathon did you do? I'm also impressed that you ran a 14K. I only ever hear people in the US speaking in miles, so you've converted that
with
to
the
the
running,
metric
yeah,
system nicely.
I have no idea how far it was, but I'm telling you, there was chocolate involved, and my friend talked me into it. I was like, okay. Also, the half marathon I did, it was the Nike Women's Half Marathon in San Francisco,
Yeah,
where you
sweet.
ran uphill for 13 miles. I was like, how is this possible? It was miserable. Like my
That's
IT
horrible.
band was like, I couldn't walk right for at least a couple weeks after. My husband's like, why are you doing this? I'm like, I don't know. Because I got a cool shirt out of the deal. So like I understand like the mechanics of running without having to run myself. So I
Yeah.
respect that. Where I like to start with everyone is with a mobility assessment. And I'm fully virtual. So how that works is I have a series of movements, squat, a hip hinge, some shoulder extension, like interlacing your hands behind you and trying to straighten your arms back there, and like balancing on one foot. So I have people record themselves doing these specific movements and send them to me. And then also the intake is like, what's going on? What hurts? Injury history, those kinds of things. And so, what I'm looking at in the video is how your major body areas are moving. So, if as you're reaching your arms overhead, I'm watching your rib cage go along for the ride so that now your spine is in an arc, I know that your core muscles probably don't know how to stabilize you in neutral. So, that's going to be a place we start. If as you're squatting, I'm watching, the knees fall into one another or they're wobbling all over the place, great. Hips are going to be something that we'll also be focusing on. And then also too with feet, I feel like that's a place with runners, you're probably thinking about your feet more often, but most people just like stuff them into shoes and like never think about them again. But if the foot itself and the ankle joint aren't moving as they need to be, that's going to have a like domino effect on everything above it as well. So I'm looking for what's moving and what's not moving. And I would say with like 99.9% of people, where we start is working on the awareness and strength to keep your spine in neutral while you're breathing and while you are moving your limbs, usually the legs, and then we add the arms on later.
Yeah, yeah. One of the big ones in the running world is just, especially for trail runners, is rolled ankles. And I
Mhm.
put myself in this category a little bit. My right ankle has been rolled so many times that it's actually embarrassing. It's like a floppy joint at the moment. I'm going through some strengthening, some stability exercises to try and improve it. But for someone with that, like, what would you recommend I do? Because from what I understand, I've been to a physio and I've spoken to quite a number of people about it, and stability seems to be the one. And I might not have been as consistent with it as what I probably have. As you said, like, I'm not competing necessarily anymore, so I probably haven't had that drive to really get on top of it. But it's bad. Sometimes I remember once I sat down on a couch and I sat down on a funny angle and it kind of like popped out of place. I was like, this is really bad. This needs attention.
No.
And for those of you just listening, Alex's eyes almost popped out of her head. And that's what happens. That's always nerve-wracking when you see a health professional's eyes pop out of their head when you tell them a symptom.
Yeah.
But
Oh my goodness.
what is going on there? So is that just ligaments? And so I've had an x-ray, and from what we can see, there's nothing that's been snapped, like nothing snapped
Right.
necessarily. I think it's just like the way he explained, it's like an elastic band which has been stretched a little bit. Now it's just a little bit like that. So
Yeah.
is that something that's treatable? Is it something that's fixable? Because I asked this question not just for my own selfish purposes, but knowing that there'd be plenty of rolled ankles listening out there.
Oh, same, 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 same. Well, here's a question for you. Is it the same side that you were having that calf tension?
No, actually, it's not. It's the opposite side. So I got like a floppy right ankle, and I've got
Mhm.
not anymore, but my left calf has been the problem.
Interesting. Okay. So similarly, in a case of like hypermobility, if the joint itself doesn't have that stability, you're going to use the muscles around it to create stability. So I played soccer growing up. The field at my high school was like Gopher Hole Central. So it's just like accidents waiting to happen. And then of course in high school they're like, just run it off. And I'm like, okay. So many sprained ankles, so many. And there is like so in the ankle, when bone is connected to bone, that's where we have ligaments, and tendons are what connect your muscle to bone. So ligaments have poor blood supply as well. So if there is an injury to them, there's not a ton of healing that happens. So that's kind of that descriptor of like, oh, it's like an elastic band that's been overstretched. So if there is a lot of, like chronic repetitive issues like in the ankle, yeah, it's probably not going to be the same as it always was, but working on a lot of single leg balance barefoot and also on unstable surfaces. So at home, you could do like a rolled up, or not even a rolled up, but like a folded up towel or blanket to have like something squishy to work on, and then do that like heel tap exercise I was talking about, where you're standing and balancing on one leg and like tapping the opposite foot to the floor. You could do it just in one position. You could do it like as if you're standing on a clock. You've probably seen that exercise
I
before.
think this is one that I've done. Yeah, yeah. That is
Yeah.
I can feel that really like hitting. That's my favorite exercise. That one that you just said. Yeah, like I do the clock formation. So you'd be like, all right, 2 o'clock, touch 2 o'clock, touch
Yeah.
1 o'clock, whatever. And
Yeah.
if I do that for a couple of minutes, I can definitely tell something's working.
Yeah. And so if you make the surface you're standing on less stable, so again, like something squishy, like a blanket or whatever, then your foot and all of the intrinsic muscles within your foot have to work more. So that's a way, again, if we're thinking of like an activation, that's how I can retrain my brain and foot and ankle to better communicate. So when I am running, I am walking, doing whatever, that brain body connection is improved. Because anytime we've had an injury as well, again, it's protective. Your body's like, that hurt. I don't want to do that again. Let's just like not talk to that ankle, which would be fine, except then you sprain your ankle like 16 more times, right? Yeah, I'm like, same. And it's so part of the recovery process, no matter how long it's been, is reestablishing proprioception, or your body's sense of where you are in space. Therapy balls, touch, massage help to accelerate that process. And then that activation as well helps to like bring all of those muscles back online. And the best way too is start to incorporate something like that clock tap exercise into your running warm up. So
Yeah.
whatever activations, like one I do all the time is like a hip rotation type of thing to make sure that my hips and low back and pelvis are all like ready to go before I start lifting weights. And that's just a part of my warm up that I do every time I work out.
That's awesome. I was going to ask you that question. Like, how often should I be doing that? Is that a daily thing that you would recommend doing for a few minutes?
I mean, it depends too. Like if you pair it with your run, it's going to be more likely that you're going to remember it.
Yeah.
Things like heel taps, like if I'm talking on the phone, I'm usually doing heel taps because it's just like something to do. Um, so as long as, again, I'm like a nerd, I'm always doing
I
things.
love it.
I'm
I
even
love
like,
it.
let me show you and I'll describe it. I have like massage sandals, like the little rocks. I'm standing here on these
Oh,
too
they
as
look
I'm standing here talking.
fantastic.
You got to wear socks or it's way too painful. But there's how you do movement. It's like stacking it to what you're already doing.
That is
See.
awesome. What are those shoes?
What are these called? Like acupressure sandals. I have them linked. If you go to aewellness.com/links, they are linked there under gear and resources.
Oh, are they
But
yours?
no, they're not mine. They're on
Oh,
Amazon.
oh,
But
I was so impressed. I was like, "Mate, I've never seen those before." I was like, "Yeah, how come we haven't been talking about the rock sandals for half of this episode?"
because I'm secretly standing on them. But also that like that's the thing. Is there a phone call that you're doing like with clients within your work, or some way that you can stack and bring that movement variety into what you're already doing? While I brush my teeth, I'm doing stuff like that too, because I just know the more I can move my foot and ankle intentionally, the next time I like trip over an acorn or whatever, it's not going to be, it happens, it's not going to be as detrimental because my body is more like prepared for that type of movement. And really too, like that's what mobility is about. I'm doing the weird movements and weird things. So when I am tired or I'm like up in the middle of the night picking up a kid and I move weird, my body's like, that's okay. We've built up enough to be resilient to that,
Yeah, that's a really good point. So yeah, you're essentially training for the surprises or the just random movements that happen without you even really meaning to. Because I noticed that at
Mhm.
the gym sometimes. I never used to warm up, despite everything I know about how important warm ups are in running. I was like, you know what, I don't need it in here. And a couple of times, like I had a little couple of neck strains, a couple of shoulder strains, and from there I've started to incorporate just some random movements. But one of the ones, and I'm sure you would have seen people do it. You have like an elastic band or whatever it is, and you sort of like a rotator
Mhm.
cuff movement. You know that one?
Yeah.
And I
Yep.
don't necessarily know how much stronger I am, but I always feel better going into a workout like that. In case I don't know if it's because there's just less of a chance of a nasty surprise if you're trying to lift a heavy weight or what. But there's definitely been a correlation between like the amount of injuries that I've had in the gym and me just taking the time to. This has been like a therapy session for me. I've realized that warm up is my answer personally. I hope the listeners have felt
Yeah.
as much help in this conversation as what I have. But yeah, I like that. I've never really thought about training just being to ward off any nasty surprises that might just pop up. And it sounds like you're a
Yeah.
master of it. I've never seen someone do a podcast like the stand-up desk was impressive at the start, but the fact you're wearing pebble
I mean,
shoes.
I put them on and I take them off. I put them on, I take them off. So there's a lot of stuff happening over here.
Have you got any other random little pebble shoe equivalents that no one else might know about? Because that
I
was
do. There's actually, these are also linked at aewellness.com/links. There's a product called the Neuro Ball, which is it's, I have it in my bag, but I have to dig around to it. Also textured. So that's the thing with feet too, right? We usually wear socks, we're in shoes, and your feet have enough nerve endings to be as sensitive as your hands, but they're always inside a shoe. So any type of texture or, different ways you can like wake up your feet are going to allow your feet to be more responsive to your environment. So stepping on, I also have a standing mat here at my desk that also has textures on it, or I'll step on that neuro ball that I talked about. It's from a company called Rad Roller, or even like the therapy balls, like having something under your feet will help too, of just like keeping yourself awake and like engaged and like fidgeting, so all kinds of stuff. There's a lot of things here on the floor in the
That's awesome.
office.
That's cool. Now your office sounds fun. We live the beach is over here, and every now and then when I've got a little bit of time, I'll go for a long walk just in the soft sand, just in bare feet.
Yeah.
And I
Hmm.
started doing that after a chat with a guy called John Quinn, he's been on the show a few times. He's an exercise physiologist, and he was talking about just some of the benefits of what it is that you're explaining, just those random movements. And
Hmm.
what was amazing to me was the next day after I'd done this for the first time, I woke up and my plantar fascias were so sore. It
Yeah.
was like a little a gym workout just for those.
Yeah.
And I can only assume that what was happening was they were just being activated in ways that they're probably not being touched when I'm just out there in running shoes on pretty stable ground.
Yeah, absolutely. It's more movement than they're used to, and it's not bad. It's just like we have to train for that as well. And it's like life happens too, especially when you're an active person. And there's gonna be like the freak injuries that I can't necessarily control. Like the last really bad ankle sprain, I tripped off a sidewalk at an airport. Like I
Oh
wasn't even
no.
doing anything, and like life happens. So what I do with my movement and my mobility is I'm making sure to be like saving away as much in the mobility bank as I can so that when that, credit comes through and I try to use the card, there's enough there to cover it
Yeah.
so that my recovery is faster, so that the recovery is even like less impactful on the rest of my body, like all of those things, so that when I decide that like I can't even finish. I would say when I decide the strength training isn't for me, I was like, that's never going to happen. But whatever movement it is, because I feel like so many people have given up specific types of workouts or movements because they've been told that, that's why you're injured and you can't do that anymore. And I just want to be the one who gets to decide on my terms, not because of pain or injury. And that's what mobility work and this body maintenance allows me to do.
That's really cool. That's really cool. I was listening to a guy on, do you know Rich Roll, the podcast?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of his podcast. And he had a guy who was a centurion. I think he was 101 at the time he was on the show. And
Wow.
he had him on there because he was the marathon world record holder for his age group. And
Oh,
Rich
of
said,
course.
and one of the funniest questions was, Rich was like, how did you become the best in the world? How did you run the fastest time? He's like, well, in fairness, if you can finish a marathon at my age, you're probably going to be the world record holder. But what I liked about it was this guy throughout his whole life, he hadn't just been a runner. He'd been a rower. He'd been involved in so many different kind of movement-based sports that I thought it was interesting that as this was something that he'd invested in for so many years, it was like the proof was in the pudding. Essentially, you look at this guy and you're like, oh, okay, well, I can see that. Like, not only you're lucky enough to be alive, but you're also moving around at a rate that a lot of people in their probably 50s, 60s, and 70s wouldn't be able to do so. So I think I found a lot of hope in that. And for me, it's like the investment in my strength conditioning kind of program now is more about that longevity, investing in old Tyson Popplestone more than what it is about sport performance. But I guess you tick both of those boxes. If you're an athlete, you get the benefits there. If you're just someone who wants to, feel good like yourself and myself, it ticks that box as well. So it's a pretty cool scene that you got yourself in, huh?
Yeah, there it is.
That's
and also
awesome.
too, I just want to say as well, if someone's listening and they're like, well, I kind of want to get it back into running or whatever, it's never too late to start. Because even if as we get older, our bodies are slower to respond and those collagen changes are like slower to change. Yes, but your body is constantly adapting to how you move most. And so also like how it feels is a direct reflection of that as well. So it's never too late to get started. It's never too late to like start making changes. And also it's never too early to get started. So like, yes to all of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you said you're doing virtual stuff. So anyone who's in Australia, Europe, US, doesn't matter. You don't have to be in LA for you to be how good's the internet?
No,
It's
it.
it's so good. It works well for things like this. Otherwise I would have been waiting a long time to do this podcast with you as well. Really good. So obviously aewellness.com is where people can find you. You've got a podcast of your own, I see. What's the name of your podcast for those interested?
Yes, it's the Body Nerd Show. And I do episodes every week, usually just with me, 15 to 20 minutes focused on a specific topic with all of the, like, here's what's happening, here's the research that supports it, and here's some exercises that you can do so that you can get back to doing what you want without pain.
Yeah, awesome. I also see you got a lot of YouTube videos, but not so many recent ones. So I was going to ask when we're going to see you back up there.
Well, so all of the YouTube style videos that I make now go into my video vault and my membership Movement Mavens. So I'm still making lots of videos, but we have to work together. And then I'll show you all the new ones I've made.
Yeah, it's good. No, that's really good. Okay, I didn't realize you had a membership as well. So that's for obviously strength, mobility. What are your members getting in there?
Yeah, so Movement Mavens specifically is for movement-minded females who want to move better and feel better. We do live workouts, both strength training and also more just like mobility-based kind of things. And then also we do a session every month called the Body Lab, the Brain Lab. It's all, again, very nerdy. Here's the anatomy about relaxation, about knees, about plantar fascia, and then here's the exercises that you can do to make it feel better, as supported by that whole video library that now I think has over, because I started making YouTube videos back in 2012. So there's like
I had a look through. Yeah.
There's lots of videos in there.
That's awesome. I love it. Hey, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate your patience as well. I gotta tell you, you need to get up on a stage and tell a couple of jokes. I told you, I can't remember if we were recording when I told you that stand-up comedy is one of my things, but I feel like you got a little knack there. So if you got a spare hour in your week, you might be up at Flippers. Maybe I'll be coming to watch you up there.
They do have classes. I won tickets one time and I never went.
Do it. You should do it. It's so not like you haven't got enough on your plate. Please, honestly, please do it, and please tell me when you do it, because I I haven't laughed that much on a podcast in a long time. So like, even just the
Well, thank
images of
you.
you tripping over on an acorn. I hope you're okay. But gee, that looked funny in my head.
I mean, it's like, you know it too, right? You're walking down the street and you're probably on your phone or like looking at your dog, and there's that stupid little seed pod, and then you're like, ah, it's
Yeah.
absolutely happened. It was
Oh
terrible.
man, oh, you poor thing, Alex. You're a legend. That was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it. For those of you interested, as I said, I'll link everything in the show notes. But we'll have to do it again sometime if you're interested, because that was a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
All right,
Yeah,
I'll
thanks so
see you
much for
later.
having me.
No worries. See you
Bye.
soon. See you, everybody.